Hi everyone, my name is Ines. I'm the founder of Girls Talk Business, and I'm here with Ashleigh an employment advocate who is based in Christchurch. Ashleigh provides services for employees and employers in New Zealand nationwide. So Ashleigh's background is she is legally qualified. She has achieved a master's in law. Ashleigh's also a member of the Employment Law Institute of New Zealand. She believes that every person should have access to employment law services, irrespective of their financial situation. So welcome, Ashleigh.
Thank you.
So the reason I called you here today was just to clarify a few things that our government introduced yesterday and talk to us about what is actually going on right now.
Thank you. Well, yes, I've been doing a lot of vaccination related work in the employment space. So this started quite some months ago with the customs border worker, taking that through the authority into the High Court. So I'm all over the situation. What makes me a little bit different, I think, is that I provide a very impartial view on the law. The law is the law. It doesn't matter what I think about vaccines. It just is what it is. And I've been trying to use that to take that with me to give people a bit more of a comfort and a safety net, because it is new law. We don't know, but I can at least provide procedural elements in what's happening. So I guess like what's been happening this week or in the last couple of weeks, we already know we've got the vaccination mandate that is meant to be coming out for healthcare workers and teachers. One big issue with this that a lot of people don't realise is that it's actually not published yet, which means that we actually can't really give too much advice about what that looks like. I know that sounds a bit silly for most people, right? But the word border worker actually never featured in the first vaccination order. So the healthcare worker is a similar idea. Like, does that cover social workers? Does that cover, say, chefs working in the healthcare sector? You know, who does that cover? And then we had the bombshell on Friday, which is the vaccination certificates, which from what I hear, again, not published, so I just have to go by what I've seen, will largely affect all customer-facing roles. And while the vaccine certificate system appears to be in place for, say, people coming in and out of the business, I think it's implied that it will extend to an employer's employees.
It's a minefield, isn't it? Like, I just can't even fathom what all these people are thinking right now and the concerns they might have with the employees, the employers, wondering how it's going to affect them and their business. And right now they've, obviously come out of, especially in Auckland, there's been lockdown after lockdown. So I'm just wondering, what are you seeing right now? Are you having inquiries being made to you with in regards to employees wondering, okay, so where do I stand? What do I do?
Yes, I've got so many inquiries coming into, I guess, my email account and through Facebook, not just from employees. Sometimes there are contractors, and I can't really provide too much advice for them, but also employers. I think the biggest concern for everyone right now is uncertainty, because employers are saying, "What I've just seen this on the TV. This is what the Prime Minister is saying," and it's a very genuine want to go to the employee and say, "I need to do something about it." But then on the other hand, the employee is getting this letter and they're like, well, the order doesn't exist. I can't get legal advice. I don't know where I stand. And it's actually just a really confusing time for everyone. And stress is culminating on stress. And I think the biggest part is both parties are really stressed right now, both the employee and the employer, and just trying to do what's best.
So what are you seeing with the employees? Are they asking for time off to sort of, say, look, I don't know what's happening? Are you seeing a lot of that type of confusion going on? Because I mean, one of the things that I've heard is that people still aren't, some of them are not ready to make decisions on whether they want to be vaccinated or not. They're still holding out and they're wondering, well, can I hold out long enough till I have more answers and some of these questions answered that are sitting in the background? Are you seeing conversations like that happening more and more?
Well, I guess the problem is that a lot of employees don't know what to ask for and how to go about these processes. So that's a large part of what I've been trying to do to help, because there is a lot of legal misinformation out there. I've seen some of the template letters that are being given to employees, and those template letters are essentially trying to get the employer to explain what's in the vaccine, what the risks of harm from the vaccine are, breach of the Nuremberg Code, all these other anti-vax type sentiments in a letter. The problem is with a letter like that is in employment law, an employer just has to justify as being what's fair and reasonable in the circumstances. And so you think a small employer, if you're just taking advice from the government, that's fair and reasonable. A small employer is not expected to go and get a scientist and do this information. And so what I'm finding is that there's a lot of employees thinking, okay, this looks good. And I have to come back and say, no, actually what you need to do is just ask for time, talk to your employer, say, look, I want to get legal advice, but there's nothing out at the moment. Can I just go on leave past the 30th of October? There's nothing in any vaccination order that actually says you have to sack them. It just says that they can't, say, do that work, which means they could be on leave.
I think the way this whole information has been delivered, there's this, we spoke briefly about this before we started the recording, and that's this fear. And I think everyone is in such fear right now, wondering, am I making the right decision if I get vaxxed? Am I making the right decision if I don't get vaxxed? Am I making the right decision if I stay at work? I think it's just a frightening time for everyone. So what would you maybe recommend to people that are fearful right now? I know you've said take some time off, but as an employer, how do they cope with all of this?
I guess starting with the employer is recognizing a lot of the stress that an employee is going to be under. So I think it's okay for an employer to say, look, we've seen this happen on the news. This is what they're saying. I don't know, if that's going to impact us, but I want to have those conversations now. It's a very informal type process. The employer will probably need to give the employee a period of leave after that date. But if it is to do with, say, vaccination certificates in particular, let's say it's not healthcare, you've got some time. I think they're estimating the vaccine certificates to come out around mid-December. And so I think that those customer-facing companies can talk to their employees and say, this was the announcement, this is something we're working through. We'll have to come to you. We're getting our own advice. It's not out right now, but I just want to let you know. And I think that it's better to be upfront, but without a formal threat, because that's the part that throws the employee into a spiral when it's saying you're going to be sacked in the middle of December if you don't get the vaccine. That's just what's making it really difficult. But I think it's okay as an employee to say, look, I don't know, but I just want to let you know that I think we're going to be covered in this.
I'm not laughing because of that comment. I'm laughing because it's an instant I hope the message that people can get out of this is that if you do have an open and honest conversation, you can work together. So there's no point throwing more fear around making someone do something that they're not ready to do, or it just does come down to communication, doesn't it? If you're both communicating well together, you can both come out of this, hopefully. Everyone's going to be a lot happier and a lot calmer, but I do think that there's this fear is driving a lot of people to do some things that they probably wouldn't be doing.
And it also drives an us and them type complex. So if an employee and employer sit down, right, you take the issue of vaccines away, this employer could say, you're an amazing employee and we really want to keep you. You've got some time. I'm bound by law, but talk to the employee about what they can do. Maybe they need to go and get some medical advice. Maybe it's for religious reasons. Maybe they just want time. Maybe they're waiting for a different vaccine. I don't know. But from what it looks like with the vaccine certificates is, again, it's not necessarily saying you have to dismiss employees, because employment law will always come first. And so what that means is there's always going to be some flexibility. There's always an exception to the rule. And so it's about, I think, recognizing as an employer that if you do have employees that are outstanding, but they're quite concerned, is just talk them through maybe what you might need to satisfy your obligations, not necessarily what you want personally, but saying, look, if I'm an employer, at least if I have this information, that might help me. And I think then the employee is going to feel a bit safer and say, okay, I understand, thank you, this is what we need. Or it's just about coming up with some really out of the box sort of solutions.
Gosh, I love the way you've just said that. I mean, just by you saying that makes me feel a lot calmer about the whole situation as well. So I do wonder whether some people are listening to a lot of misinformation, and they are going to places where they're justifying some of these actions, which is based around fear. So I wonder if, if everyone just calms down a little bit and steps away from this whole emotional turmoil that's going on, the uncertainty, and then they can focus and think clearly. But that is all a process and a step. So right now you're obviously busy.
Yes.
So what's a story you can share with us maybe right now that would help some employers?
I guess it's not so much a story per se, but just experience. I've been through this from start to finish. I guess I was one of the first to stick my head above the parapet and take these cases on. A lot of what I try to say to people is trust the process. So one thing that a lot of people didn't realize is that with all the border or with all the vaccination orders, there's always been an option for companies to apply to the government to get an exemption for the employees, not just on medical reasons. Actually, a lot of them are to say, look, I can't replace this employee. And that was in recognition that actually a lot of these port workers, these companies would not be able to replace them quick enough. And so if these kinds of exemptions were in there for the protection of employers, in the original vaccinations orders, whatever's going to come out, there's always going to be some kind of exemption. And so I think the best thing to do is just trust that process. You don't have to take a hard line. Everything will come out, and just be a good person.
Gosh, I think it's really showing to all of us in New Zealand who is thinking about themselves, who's thinking about others, and who is living their truth about being a good person. I do wonder if some people are just so frustrated that they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, I've got one case actually that it's just published information, so it's not confidential. So I've got a case with an employee that worked for Auckland International Airport. And so they actually brought forward the date of the first vaccination order, which you can't do. But in any event, so we went hard and fast through the legal avenues, right? I worked through a Saturday, we filed on the Saturday. And so I think it was the 28th of August, and he was due to be dismissed or get notice on the 1st of September. So I wrote to them saying, please hold off, we've just filed, I'm trying to stop this. And they said, no. And then so we had to go up to the employment court for an interlocutory kind of intermediate matter, come back to the authority. And then all we were trying to do is get like an interim injunction just to stop the termination. We just said he just wants time. He's been there for 15 years. Those kinds of employees are rare. But after the 30th of September, which was the date that he was supposed to be dismissed, and the date that we got the decision from the authority, which was whether or not he's going to keep his job, they just sacked him anyway. And like, this is a person that had months worth of annual leave. And I use this as an example, I think, to show that kind of, non-caring type attitude. My entire argument with this employee is just been saying he's been working there for 15 years. What's a couple of months on annual leave? He's got long service leave. He's been there that long. And he actually works out in the tarmac. He doesn't go anywhere. So it was such an upsetting thing for him as an employee. He's just actually bought a house, he's just got a mortgage, and he's in the same boat as just saying, actually, I just want time. And I think taking that from his experience is just saying to everyone, there's nothing wrong with giving people just a bit of even their own annual leave, or talking them through other options. Because what scares people the most is feeling like they don't have options. And I think it's just giving people that time to get options. And even if they don't use it, what if they don't get legal advice? It's that empowerment of knowing that you can.
So right now, have you heard from him? Is he doing okay, or has he got another job? I mean, tell me the story.
So, well, the Employment Relations Authority decided not to reinstate or interim reinstate. So we're actually challenging that to the Employment Court. And the reason we've done that is actually, so the Employment Relations Authority found that we have a good arguable case that he actually wasn't covered under the vaccination order at all. And that there wasn't a good process. But they've said, well, we don't want to reinstate him, but in case there's a risk. And we're like, well, we didn't ask for that. We wanted him to be on annual leave. So we're going up to the court because I think people forget as well that tether of employment, whether or not you're actually present, is so important. I think a good example is, let's say someone that's got health issues and they know they're not at work, but that just knowing you're still employed is like, it's like a beacon of hope. Like, it's okay, I'm going to get better, I'm going to go back. And so, yeah, at the moment, he's just waiting. We're going back to the court on, I think it's the 5th of November that we are giving submissions again, just to try and keep that tether. And then after that, we still have to keep going, and it's still a battle, but someone has to be first. Someone has to set it. And I think on that basis too, another thing I've been saying to people is, irrespective of what you think about vaccines, what I'm doing is I'm getting clarity for people. There are 11 reported vaccine cases and 9 of them are mine. So I'm getting out there, and no matter what way it falls, I'm getting more and more clarity and certainty for employees and employers.
Gosh, I mean, God, I just wish you all the best of luck with that process, and I hope something eventuates where it's, you know, both parties are going to be satisfied. So we've talked about employees and employers. Is there something that you can share with us regarding small business owners who are sole operators? They don't have staff, they're working from home. How is this scenario going to affect them? Like, is there anything that you know about that situation right now that you could share with us?
Well, obviously I only really work in employment law, but look, from what I've seen from the, say, vaccine certificates, if you're just a sole employee, or you're working for yourself, I don't think it's going to be an issue. If you're maybe selling goods at a market, but then there are other relationship issues. So I've just had someone recently contact me today that it does in that situation. And she said, look, the market's now sent everyone an email saying, if you're not vaccinated, you're not setting up a stall. So I think it's largely going to come down to those business relationships and what they're going to expect. But I mean, like, I'm in that boat, right? I work from home, I'm self-employed. I mean, I do see people obviously for a living because that's my job, but there doesn't seem to be anything there to say whether or not I need to be vaccinated. And I would expect probably very similar for a lot of people.
Right. So right now, hopefully nothing to worry about.
I'd say so. And I think if it is going to be something to worry about, it would be very explicit, because then you're really cutting and closing the doors, not just to avenues for employment, but avenues for self-employment. And even the government, actually, to be honest, has said that companies don't need to adhere to the vaccination certificate program. But if they don't, then there's going to be more restrictions. And so, of course, from what I'm gathering, if you work by yourself, you're not going to get 50 people in your house anyway. So those restrictions probably ain't going to work.
Right. So, I mean, I love the fact that we've talked about this today, because I think I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with learning more and understanding how this is going to affect all of us. Have you had much thoughts around the traffic light mandate that she's implementing right now, the red, orange and green? Have you read anything up that you could share with us? How is that going to affect? I suppose it's mainly Auckland right now that we're talking. Would that be right? Or is it the whole of New Zealand?
I think from what I remember reading on seeing is that it is going to be the whole of New Zealand. Is that all of New Zealand, we do need to look to get to 90% double vaccination rates. My personal view is that it seems a bit clunky and a bit confusing, just having these sort of vague ideas about which is which. The positive thing is that companies can operate, but 90% double vaccination is quite high. And my concern is that, say, for example, the DHB areas that have a high proportion of Māori or Pacifica people, is that there's going to become again an us and them complex, trying to push and force people to get vaccinated. And I guess I'm personally a bit concerned about the impact of that on Māori, and I know that Te Pāti Māori are posting about it. And I just think in general, a lot of areas, I mean, it goes by DHB to DHB. My concern is creating a situation where people are like, go and get vaccinated because we want to open up, get our livelihoods. It's just going to create more and more and more of an us and them complex.
I'm not sure how we're going to be able to get past all of this focus on vaccine versus non-vaccine people. I've got to be careful how I word this because, you know, it is a touchy subject for so many people right now. I really don't know. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm sure nobody does have a crystal ball to see what the future is going to look like. But it's certainly, I think the best thing we can do is just keep talking, keep communicating, and keep finding ways that we can work together rather than work separately.
I think that's the best thing. I mean, even the people that are vaccinated, there's a lot of, I mean, I am personally vaccinated. I was vaccinated as part of the vulnerable people rollout. There's a lot of us that also don't agree with a lot of these changes. And so, you know, I deal with a lot of people that aren't getting vaccinated and they're really scared of being isolated. And don't get me wrong, there are some people that are very positional, but there's many of us that are vaccinated that don't agree with what's happening. And there is a really good space, I think, to talk. And a lot of us that are scared, not just of the vaccine issue, but I guess for me personally, it's just our entire political structure and system. What is that going to look like? And the people and the divide, to me, there's so much more questions, and we're all kind of in, I guess, similar space that we can all share a level of understanding.
I think this is what it should be about. The more we can talk to each other, the more we can overcome some of these fears and share our fears with the other person and hopefully get empathy and understanding of how that person feels. I think if you try and put us segregated into vax and non-vax, it just becomes an us and them, and there is no solution to that. It's more divide, and I do feel sorry for the vulnerable ones right now, because they must be just, you know, in so much fear about what's going on, where, you know, I do wonder about the government and the way they are wording some of the things that they're saying. It's becoming more insistent, and, you know, very few people like to hear that, you know, that type of conversation coming, that we should be doing stuff. You have to, you know, there are other ways you can communicate and get better results. And I wonder why this is what our, you know, dear Prime Minister is doing, is she's insisting on this one way thinking. But I don't know. I myself am confused, but after today I've had a little bit more clarity. I do like the fact that people should keep reading and keep researching, whatever questions they might have. Hopefully get more answers than less confusion.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing I could just say is something cheeky I do anyway, is if you're on LinkedIn, go and follow all the law firms, because I can guarantee you it's like their number one posting thing right now. And so a lot of it, you know, you can take it with a grain of salt, but hey, if you've got some law firms posting all these different articles, at least you're keeping on top of it. I personally do, because I'm really busy, and so it just keeps me up to date with some of the new cases that are coming through.
I think that's how we are going to grow as a society. Is we're all going to come together sharing our knowledge, and this way we can all learn together, because not everyone has all the answers. We all have answers. They're all different ways of coming in and conversing and bringing everybody together. So is there anything else you'd like to talk to us about today, like I haven't thought of yet? I'm being very strategic in my choice of conversation. I don't want to go too deep anywhere.
I guess so I guess just for employers, just a couple of other notes around the vaccine issues is that if you are going to start a formal process, you need to have already done a health and safety policy if the government order aren't out. Now, health and safety policies are not cheap and they're not easy, and you will need quite a lot of legal advice. So in that respect, if you are waiting for a vaccination certificate, sort of regime to come out, just wait for it, because that'll stop the need for a lot of legal advice, because it is costly. I did used to give some advice and try to do what I can for employers, but it's one of those, it needs a lot of work. And I actually just hate charging for it. I just, there's nothing satisfying about it. And, even then, for an employer to go out and get one of these health and safety policies, it would cost thousands, and then you're still up for liability for a grievance. So that's why I try and keep it as informal as you can and just wait for this information to come out from the government. Be very mindful about legal advice, when to get it, whether you need it. And I think just trying to take it from a pragmatic costs approach in that sense, and also risks approach, because you don't want to be the first one going through with the personal grievance process. Let someone else do it.
No, gosh, so much to consider, and so much we haven't, so much that we still need to do, I think, is the...
Well, the other thing is as well is when some employees who are vaccinated then say they don't want to work with employees that are not vaccinated. So this is something entirely different.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't even have a health and safety policy, then you've kind of got this problem that we don't know how to manage. And then you've got this issue of both sides are going to raise grievances, and just trying to work around it. So the best thing I could say right now, while we're waiting for law and waiting for policies, is if there are this issues, is maybe just talk to the employee that's concerned and say, well, what are some options? What do you think? How can we work around this? Be honest about your business. What are you going to do? Be honest about the situation. There's no law. We don't know how to handle this. Because I suspect as well, there'll be quite a few smaller employers that probably deal with it more than what bigger employers will, because they tend to be a lot more like these family type structures, very close knit, where this probably has never been an issue before. And then you've got this close knit structure where then you're like, okay, I don't know how to deal with this because there's nothing out there. So
I still don't know myself whether we will have a choice. Is there a choice for some people to not be vaccinated and still run a business? Like, is this going to be a choice?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know yet. We don't know how wide the certificate is going to be needed. It kind of appears that potentially if you run just an online business, let's say with no customer facing, it may not be necessary. But I cannot make any guarantees until we see what that looks like. And if the vaccination order is anything, it will probably just keep getting extended and a bigger group of people until, yes, you're right, it gets to the point where you need to have a very, very, very good reason to not be vaccinated. And at that point, in my view, then you start concerned about privacy and all the rest of it. But who knows? It's a slippery slope argument right now.
But let me just ask you, don't quote me on this because I'm not a lawyer, but I do have some understanding about the government enforcing this under the Emergency Health Act rather than an overall law. So are they saying once there's no emergency, it will be removed? Is that how things work?
Yes. Well, so at the moment, we're not completely sure because nothing's going through. But I did look on the Gazette and I saw that the teachers' code conduct rules or something has got a change coming through, which I'm like, I wonder if that's how they're slipping in vaccination for teachers. I don't know because it's been updated. But everything else has come through the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act. There is currently a bill going through Parliament to get that extended to 2023. So every order made under it, yes, will just fall over in 2023, but it's not going to make a difference at that point. And look, in my view, I think that in another year, 18 months, all of this will get to the Supreme Court. And I truly think the Supreme Court will turn around and say it was unlawful and unconstitutional. But at that point, it's not going to make a difference because everyone would have already been vaccinated, or their businesses would have closed, or they would have lost their employment. And that's the really heartbreaking thing for me is we've got a lot of case law. We know that what's happening at the moment is not constitutional. And I've tried at the High Court, but it needs to go higher. And the problem is for this kind of judicial review is there's no money in it. So you've got to be really thick-skinned with a lot of risk as a client to want to go through all the way at the Supreme Court for nothing, for no monetary value, just carrying it on yourself.
Oh my goodness, just hearing that makes me, my hairs stand on end.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful you shared that with us, because that's a big deal. I mean, you've just said something that's really relevant, and you've said what everyone is thinking, how can this be happening? And it keeps happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first instance, I think there's a famous case of Fitzgerald and Muldoon, which is when Robert Muldoon went and made a change to the superannuation structure. But he did it just like Jacinda's doing right now, is just by making press statements and talking on, like, you know, to the media, rather than actually pushing things through. And so that person, or Fitzgerald, went through by himself and he got it all unraveled. So there's that part of it. We also know that secondary legislation, so these vaccination orders that are secondary in themselves, can't really override the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. That's my view, but it's something that hasn't really been tested on its own, and the High Court, I don't think, want to make that decision. I know that there are proceedings. I know this week there's with a challenge at the High Court. I know that there are more coming through. I do trust our judiciary, and I do trust that eventually they'll get thrown out. And I guess the only hope I can have for that is that maybe it'll mean another government won't do it in the future, but it won't change the position we're in, unfortunately, because it just can't have a retrospective effect. You can't then just take the vaccine out or get your job back or open your business up again. It'll be too late for the practical side of things.
I do feel so deeply for some of these businesses that will no longer be with us after all of this has been said and done. And I just cannot even begin to understand why this is happening. Why are we so focused on one thing and not on the whole picture? To me, it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I don't think small businesses are necessarily being heard in all of this either. Like, I think that there are some good measures and some bad ones. I think that's just how it's been rolled out, how it's gone about. Everything could have been earlier. I'm no politician, but what I'm hearing from a lot of small businesses is that it's hard, especially those small businesses in Auckland, where those subsidies, they're not really enough. And you've also dealing with really stressed employees and stressed clients and stressed yourself. And then outside of Auckland, you've got a lot of businesses which do rely on, like personally, because I work nationwide, I'm also reliant on Auckland employers needing or employees. And so there's a lot of small businesses that want everything to open up. They want it done properly. They want it in a way that can keep their businesses. And yeah, a lot of that, it's hard to know what that answer looks like. But I think that it's also important just to recognize that stress of being like, please listen to us as well.
I think the stress part has not even been touched. The surface has not been touched. They're going to struggle just to come to terms with the fact that they'll no longer have a business.
That's it. And I do know, I think from yesterday's announcement, it does sound like there's going to be some support for Auckland businesses to help with that shift. I think it's a regional business partner network is coming back, and also mental health support for small business owners.
Yes.
I don't know what that looks like, or whether it's going to fundamentally assist some businesses, but I think certainly it's worth doing. I mean, my own business, I went into business in February 2020, so just before kind of COVID all happened. But when I did it, I had this idea of being, you know, online and digital and different forms of communication. And so, of course, when COVID hit, everyone is like, oh, I don't understand how you just don't meet clients in an office.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but, you know, I'm part of the neurodiverse community. I'm like, so many of us actually don't want to meet in office. We just want to talk on the phone or go on Zoom. And so now that's kind of become the norm. And it was a really easy way to shift. And I didn't have to put any changes in place. And then now all these law firms, for example, having to be like, oh my gosh, we need to get that too. But it just shows way of the future and different ways of, that was an easy pivot, I guess, in terms of the legal industry, but it's always out there. It's just seeing what's there.
And it comes down to who has got the ability to pivot faster and who doesn't have the strength. And I'm so pleased that regional business partners will be providing this type of service, because it will definitely be benefiting so many people, just to get them to shift a little, whether it's in their mental capacity or whether it's to help staff. I think it's so important. So
Oh yeah.
it's good news there. I'm wondering if they're still doing enough, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah, last time when they did the HR support through the regional business network, honestly, that was so great because a lot of small businesses didn't know how to deal with restructures. I do hope, I mean, I'm hoping that's a last resort for many, but if that's an option again through the regional business partner network, it also then reduces the liability because yes, I represent employees, and it's heartbreaking when you've gone through a restructure last year because they needed it, but they've done it improperly. And then the personal grievance is what sinks them.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you've come on board so quickly, that we organised this only yesterday and you said, yes, let's talk, which was fantastic. I want to do a bit of a sales pitch for you now so you can share with us how, if someone does need your expertise, can you tell us how they can get in touch with you?
So I'm very active on almost all forms online. So look at my website, ashleightheadvocate.co.nz, or Facebook, again, Ashleigh the Advocate, email, text, call, all my details, you can search me online. I don't have an employer tab on my website. And the reason I took that off is just because I didn't have enough employers contacting me. But look, I am for the people, and people are employers too. So if you really need preliminary advice, I tend to give a lot for free, whether you're an employee and employer. If you need more formal advice and you're really strapped for cash, but there's a real need for it, just talk to me because it's there, it's an option. And what I try to do is help people that don't have other options. And unfortunately for a lot of small businesses, it's not like you can go to community law, you can't get legal aid, you can't get cheaper or better alternatives. And so when there are small businesses in need, I can assist. So certainly get in touch. And of course, for employees, well, all that information is on my website.
Well, we need more people like you. We need more people that want to help others. I think it's so important, especially right now. And yeah, I think it's so awesome that you do offer that service. And I have no doubt that you're going to do amazing things. Good luck with it all. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the time you spent with me today. And hopefully someone will find this information helpful to them and they can reach out to you if they need you. So
Thank you.